Hi everyone, a very warm welcome to all of you and a very good evening to today and welcome to today's webinar on the concepts of TDS and TCS. So I'll wait for another minute for everyone to settle in and then we can start our today's session. So while everyone settle in, I'll start with my introduction. I am Ridhima Bhatia by profession. I'm a chartered accountant and I'm associated with Taxmann in the research and advisory department. So I can go on and about how much the term concepts matter. They are the foundation of our understanding. And yes, if the foundation is solid and strong, the results would be stronger. So today's webinar is one such topic, which is your concept of TDS and TCS. I mean, tax, TDS, TCS, if any of us is working or would be working or knows anyone is working or is into any commercial activity or an income generating activity, this word TDS and TCS, I think everyone must have heard of. But what actually it is, why this concept is very important, why government has this concept, and then how actually a deductor will come into picture, who has to obtain TAN, who has to quote TAN, when the TAN has to be quoted, what are their penalties. All of this would be discussed in today's session. So I'm looking forward for a very interactive section. I request you all to please ask your queries through chat box. I'll try to answer maximum queries towards the end of the session. So let's begin today with our session. Just 1 second. So the concept of TDS and TCS, why it is there, but before that, if you see on the screen, you can see this term called Taxmann Academy. Can I just take your time and give you a very small percentage of what actually Academy is and why this whole webinar is important from the perspective of our vision. I'll just quickly, just 1 second, I'll share the So Taxman Academy is one vertical of Taxman whereby our vision is to make people train and learn online through our course. Our course, which is Tax and Accounts Professional course, aims to give you practical and conceptual training of tax and corporate compliances. So we try, because we know with the as a part of industry that what industry needs, where are we industry actually facing challenges when it comes to training the staff, and on the contrary we also know that what students or what people who want to start their career or who have already started their career are struggling with. So with an adaptation and understanding of both the needs, we bring you the tax and account professional course. The course is of 3 levels: level 1, 2 and 3. Level 1 tells you about the basic knowledge of all laws. It has your knowledge for income tax, GST, payroll, MS Office, bookkeeping, personality development. So it goes on and on. And then level 2 visions to upgrade and upskill the knowledge which you've obtained at the basic level. And level 3, which is your master level, as the name suggests, it will give you core training on certain industries, their compliances, what those industry do, what are their core compliances. So that is how the level is divided. Level 1 is for everyone and anyone who is starting a business, doing a business, learning, just started their career, is still at a stage of graduation, or is still wondering of how and when and I should enter the industry with what skill set. So level 1 is a package of starting and building your foundation. So this is whole of our curriculum, and today's topic is just 1% what we teach in our entire curriculum. This is our levels 1 curriculum. I'll discuss it later once we do today's topic, and then I'll come to it, and I'll be very happy to take your queries on the topic and anything towards our course. So to begin with the concept of TDS and TCS, why this concept is. Now, let me tell you what actually happens. Does anyone know what PAN is? Have you heard about this? What is a PAN, a permanent account number? Great. So obviously you all have to. Yes, Hetal, permanent account number. ये किसके लिए होता है? For who do we have PAN? For anyone? Is it like your birth certificate? Why do we have PAN? Very good, Vishnu. So it's a track financial transactions depending upon the category. Very interesting. Now, Vishnu, let's take your example if it is okay. Now, there is one Vishnu, and there can be thousands of Vishnu, right? And their name, their identity by the name could be same, but all of them are different people. So how does one authority knows that who is who? So they categorize. What they do is they issue a unique number, a unique identification number to each of us, and that identification number, the government, the revenue department, the income tax department issues a unique identification number to all of us, and that unique identification number is called PAN. So for me, you, all of us who is there and listening, everyone will have a separate PAN number. It's a permanent account number. Many countries have their way to identify their taxpayer. Some country may use the word tax identification number, TIN number. All of these are separate things. But in India, to identify an income tax person, a person for income tax or assessee, we use the term PAN. Okay? But this is for an assessee, like you and me, person who are paying their taxes, filing their returns. So all our financial and taxation transactions would be tracked through the term and through our permanent account number. But do you know how and what happens? How do we give the government taxes? Tax is one such source of revenue for the government, right? Whatever taxes which we pay to them is their source of revenue. And there is also a concept of previous year and assessment year. Now, previous year means a financial year in which you earn the income. Assessment year means the year immediately following the previous year where you assess that income and give the taxes to the government. So here you earn your income. Sorry for the bad handwriting. And here the taxes are offered. Basically, the income is assessed. Now, so whatever you're earning in the present previous year, which is 22-23, would be offered for taxation or would be assessed in the assessment year 23-24. So what will happen? Your income you're earning in this year, which is this, but you will give the details to the department in assessment. Correct? And through giving your income details, whatever taxes are there, you deposit it. So whatever you give, it becomes a revenue to the department. But government cannot wait for an entire and a half year to get over and then get the revenue. Obviously, the cycle has to go. They are doing continuous expenditures on infrastructures, welfare, healthcare. So they need continuous revenue. Plus, the cycle should go on. So what did government do? They got us with two concepts, which is the concept of TDS, TCS and advanced tax. So I know this is not the topic, but this is a result of government earning the revenue in the same year itself, in the financial year itself. So through these two routes, which is your TDS, TCS, tax deduction at source and tax collection at source and advance tax, the government could now earn the taxes as you earn. So it's a pay as you earn scheme, which is called advance tax. That when, just the name suggests that whenever you're earning the income, you pay the tax accordingly. So pay as you earn concept. And TDS, TCS is a concept where the person who is in generating your income, who is called the source. अब अगर मुझे rent मिल रहा है, so for me the tenant is the source of income. So if I'm earning salary, so for me the employer is the source of income. So TDS, TCS is a concept whereby they put a compliance on the source to deposit, to deduct and deposit the tax. Now, how this mechanism works, let's take a look. So there is Mr. A and then there is Mr. B. Mr. A provided certain services to Mr. B and Mr. B will make payment for such services to Mr. A. Now, income किसका हो रहा है? A का. Expense किसका है? B का. So Mr. A is earning the income and he will show it as his income and he will pay taxes on it. This is what you have understood by now, right? But when the concept of TDS and TCS got introduced, I'll first explain the tax deduction at source concept and then I'll go to the tax collection at source. So when this concept of TDS got introduced, now what will happen? So if in the previous year 22-23, which is your financial year 22-23, Mr. A is earning a certain amount of income, he will show it in the assessment year 23-24 ka return and he will pay taxes. But with the concept of TDS, what the source has to do? Who is the source? Mr. B is the source. He has to deduct tax. As the name suggests, tax deduction at source. So the source will deduct tax. Now, let's take one more part here. So the services, suppose, were provided for a value of 1 lakh. Okay. The services were provided for a value of 1 lakh. And in general, what would have happened? You would say Mr. B would make the payment of this 1 lakh, correct? But now, with the concept of TDS, what will happen? Mr. B will deduct a certain percentage which would be given in the act. So suppose he has to deduct 10%. So Mr. B will deduct a certain percentage, which is 10,000, and will make payment of rupees 90,000 to Mr. A. What did I say? The services are provided for 1 lakh, but Mr. B now what he has done, since the concept of TDS is applicable, he deducted 90,000. He deducted 10,000 and paid 90,000. Now Mr. A would go fury that why are you deducting my 10,000? It's my income. I need it in my account. So Mr. B says that this is your tax deduction at source. This is your income only. This is yours only, but I have to do a compliance. I have deducted it from your payment, but I will deposit it to the government. Deposit it to the government on your behalf. So on your credit. So on Mr. A's credit. That this 10,000 is the tax for Mr. A, but deposit कौन करेगा? Mr. B. So deposit this 10,000 rupees on your credit, and once I will deposit it, how will the government know that this tax belongs to Mr. A? So Mr. B will tell through the PAN number that this tax which I'm depositing is for so and so PAN. But how will he give this information? He will file a TDS return. Return का मतलब ये नहीं होता to give back. Return is a statement which we furnish to any department. Return, GST return का मतलब है GST statement to show what are your tax output tax liability, sales purchase during the year. ऐसे TDS return is a statement furnished by Mr. B to show how much TDS was deducted, on what amount, and when, and to whom it belongs. ठीक है? And also he will issue a certificate to him कि ये look, this is a proof that I have deposited your TDS with the government. So this is how the cycle of TDS goes. Now what will happen here? Mr. B, who is the source, is now called with the name deductor, and Mr. A is called deductee. जिसने TDS डिडक्ट किया उसको कहेंगे डिडक्टर, जिसका TDS डिडक्ट हुआ उसको कहेंगे डिडक्टी. Also you can say as payer pay. So payer, he had to make a payment and he deducted the tax, and pay is Mr. A. So जिसका TDS deduct करके payment हो रहा है, that is called, that person is called the payer, and obviously he is a deductor, and जिसका TDS deduct हुआ, he is a deductee and the pay. Now I want to ask you people, for Mr. A, how much amount is the income? Is it 90,000? Is it 1 lakh, or is it something else? And similarly, what is the income for Mr. A? And similarly, what is the expense for Mr. B? Is it 90? Is it 1 lakh, or is it 1 lakh 10? How much? Okay, I believe the screen is not getting shown. So sorry. Done. Very good. So Vignesh is also right. 1 lakh. I'm so sorry for the screen. Yeah. So income for Mr. A would be 1 lakh only, and expense for Mr. B would also be 1 lakh. It's just that the cash flow analysis have been changed. He is earning 1 lakh, but 90,000 उनको आ रहा है, 10,000 उन्हीं के behalf पे government को जा रहा है. Had the tax not been deducted, what would have happened? If I am Mr. A, I would have deposited from my own pocket to the government, correct? But यहाँ पे now the tax is deducted. I cannot say कि since account में 90,000 आया है, so the income is 90,000. No, income is 1 lakh, out of which a certain proportion has been deducted. Similarly, for Mr. B, expense is 1 lakh, and for him the cash flow is also 1 lakh. The cash outflow is also 1 lakh only. 90,000 to Mr. A and 10,000 to the department. So इसी बात पे, if I talk about the accounting entry, what would be the accounting entry in this situation? In the books of B, if I talk about. So when a bill was raised, suppose expense account, so it's suppose it's a debit to Mr. A to TDS payable account. So you say आपने TDS डिडक्ट किया, बट अब आपको वो डिपॉजिट कराने गवर्नमेंट को, दैट्स व्हाई इट बिकम्स अ TDS पेबल अकाउंट. सो एक्सपेंस अकाउंट डेबिट टू मिस्टर ए टू TDS पेबल अकाउंट. यहाँ पे एक्सपेंस is of 1 lakh. Mr. A को 90,000 will go and TDS payable में 10,000. And when I will deposit it, as in Mr. B will deposit it with the government, the entry would come as TDS payable account debit to obviously bank, and this would be the entry of depositing the TDS. Yes, obviously if it's a salary payment, then you will say salary. So this is how the entry happens. Expense मेरे लिए 1 lakh है. Similarly, I hope you can make the entry in the books of accounts of Mr. A. Mr. A की books में क्या entry होगा? I'll use this small thing. For him, he will receive from Mr. B 90 and TDS receivable. This would be your asset, current asset, TDS receivable of 10,000 to your income, which is of your P&L account would be created. You can say 1 lakh. Correct? So ये aspect clear हुआ कि पहले जो TDS काटता है उसको क्या करना है, and जो TDS जिसका कट रहा है उसके लिए क्या बुक्स में एंट्री होगा. करेक्ट? गौत्री, आई थिंक यहाँ पे आपको पता चला कि क्या मिस्टेक हुआ. ग्रेट. So let's just quickly summarize. I think the screen was not visible, so I'll quickly summarize abhi tak what we discussed. Yeah. So Mr. A made a services to Mr. B. Mr. B would make a payment of, or has to make a payment of 1 lakh. But since on this income or on this services, Mr. B has to deduct TDS. So what will happen? He will deduct a certain amount of TDS, which is of 10,000, which is called tax deduction at source, and pay the net amount to Mr. A. Mr. B is called the deductor because he has to deduct the TDS, and the TDS is deducted. For both the person, Mr. A and Mr. B, the income and the expense account respectively is 1 lakh only. Only the cash flow analysis have changed. For Mr. B, he would pay 90 to Mr. A and 10 to the department, which is the income tax department, on behalf of Mr. A. And for Mr. A, he is receiving 90,000 now, and 10,000 has come to him in a form of tax credit. In a form of tax credit. Okay? And this all happens in the previous year, 22-23 itself. The year where this income is getting generated, the source itself does it. Now, what will happen when Mr. A will file his return of income? What will he do? He will show income of 1 lakh plus all of his other incomes, whatever else, what other incomes you have. You will total it. You will calculate your total income. You will calculate, as in you are Mr. A. You will calculate the total tax, and then you will get this tax credit, which was deposited by Mr. B on your behalf. Okay. Now, one second. Okay, so अभी तक किसी को कोई query है on the deducted part? अभी the story has not finished. Okay. I will come to your query, Mahendra. Very good question. Just give me a moment. So now, Mr. A का हमें समझ आ गया. When he will file his return in the assessment year 23-24, he will take that credit. But now we have to understand the concept and move ahead. Mr. B will deduct the tax and deposit it. All of these things are clear. And I told you, how would the income tax department know that Mr. A ka TDS kata hai? Mr. B will file the TDS return. So can I say what Mr. B now has to do as a compliance? One, he has to ensure the deduction of tax. Second, he has to ensure that whatever tax has been deducted would be deposited to the government. And third, now he has to file the return. So this happens, deduction happens daily when you're doing the transactions. Deposit happens monthly. Monthly मतलब आपने एक टाइम, एक पर्टिकुलर पीरियड विच इज अ मंथ में जितना भी whatever tax you have deducted, you will deposit it with the government. So that is called the deposit. Then this is called TDS return. TDS return happens quarterly. That during a quarter, whatever deduction happened, whatever deposits were made, उन सब का पूरा statement कि किस how much tax was deducted for whom and on what type of payment is given to the department. All of this has to go with the details of PAN of the deductee, because otherwise government को कैसे पता चलेगा that इस person का TDS आपने काटा है. So the PAN of deductee is very important. Then once this is done, the TDS return has been furnished, then what happens? A certificate is issued. To whom? To deductee. That I have deducted your TDS, I have deposited with the government. This is a proof. This also happens quarterly, except in one case, when we talk about salary. So all of these is a compliance on the burden of Mr. B. So he, apart from he being his assessee, Mr. B खुद भी एक assessee, उनका खुद का भी income है. Mr. B also has his own income, his own income tax return. But since he is now a deductor, he has to do so many compliances. So TDS, in short, when deduction happens, it brings it with it a lot of compliances which has to be taken care of during the services is received, when the payment is made, then deposit to the government, and then return, and then certificate. So the entry goes on and on and on. So now Mr. B जब flourish करेंगे any detail to the department, he has to do it under the unique number of TAN. Mr. B has, who is now a deductor, has to flourish all these details to the income tax department with a unique number called TAN. Mr. B SSE है, उनका खुद का income है, he must have his own PAN. But Mr. B, when he comes in the role of a deductor, he has to do all such transactions with a unique number called TAN. Now here the story gets interesting. First of all, what is the full form of TAN? Come on. Tax account number. Okay, I thought I would get this only. Yes. Taxpayers number. हम सबने सुना है. Temporary account number. Very interesting. Good. Very good. I really appreciate all of you trying. That is very good. So basically, TAN is tax collection, deduction and collection account number. People call it tax deduction number, people call it tax account number, but it actually means this. So person now, when Mr. B has to act as deductor, he will obtain this tax deduction and collection account number. Just like you obtain PAN by filing an application, when you are a deductor, you have to obtain TAN to do all such compliances. All these compliances of deduction, deposit, TDS, return, certificate has to be done through tax deduction and collection account number. Okay, now the point comes here. Does one, we have even a poll running on this. Should every PAN holder has to obtain a TAN? Is it a yes or a no? No. Very good, Godfrey. Very good, Gurdat. Anuj also says no. Yes. So it is not mandatory for every PAN number like you and me to have a TAN. TAN number will only be obtained when you are doing certain transactions on which tax at source has to be deducted. Number one. So on all other, very good. So on otherwise, if you're not doing any transactions which require deductions of tax, then TAN number is not required. So let's understand how this application of TAN has to be done. First of all, TAN is required by every person who deducts tax. Now, since it's a common name called tax deduction and collection account number, when you're doing TDS or when you're doing TCS, in both the situations, you have to obtain the TAN number, and it is one single TAN number. Okay. So in this number, when you obtain TAN, when do you have to obtain TAN? The moment you deduct someone's tax, from that date, you go to the end of the month, and within 1 month from the end of the month in which you deducted the tax, you have to file an application for allotment of TAN. If you do not file application for allotment of TAN, you become a defaulter and you have to pay penalty up to 10,000, which we'll see. So suppose Mr. B did a transaction today, which is on 30th November and which by default is the end of the month. So by 31st of December, he has to file an application for obtaining the TAN. See, these transactions on which tax are deducted are some specific transactions. Not all financial transactions which are evolving around in our ecosystem requires deduction of tax. No, there are certain sections which gives us certain details of transactions on when they cross a certain amount, you have to deduct tax. The moment you become an eligible deductor, you have to deduct tax. And the moment you deduct the tax, within 1 month from the end of the month in which the tax was deducted, you have to file for the application. Now, application is done in Form 49P. The application for TAN goes online also, offline also. How do you go offline? There are facilitation centers, 10 facilitation centers, where you can go submit the requisite document and they will submit further it to the department and you will get the TAN number. But when you file it online, it is through your protein app. I'll show you the site at the end of it. It's just a 10 minutes form. You just have to fill in basic details. No documents are required to be submitted. Just a few details, your place of business, all of these things, and submit it by paying a nominal fee of 55 plus GST. And then the form is submitted, acknowledgement would be generated, a basic verification would be done by the department, and you will receive a letter which will tell your TAN number. So this is for anyone who has to obtain TAN. But with Companies Act 2013, on the incorporation of the companies itself through this form, they get allocated the PAN number, the TAN number, all of these stuff. So they do not have to separately make an application in Form 49B. For companies, by filling SPICE form, they can easily get, along with the incorporation key details, they're allotted the PAN and TAN number also. Now, TAN number is also a number which is allocated to you. जैसे PAN card के लिए you get your PAN card in a shape of card. TAN number के लिए कुछ ऐसे card, there is no card which is issued. It's just a letter which comes to your address and to your email ID, which will show what is your TAN number. It's also a 10-digit alphanumeric number. It's a 10-digit alphanumeric number, which will have as a first 3 digit would be the place of jurisdiction. Jahan pe deductor. Everything is from the point of view of deductor. So deductor ka place of jurisdiction. So if his jurisdiction is in Delhi, it would be DEL. If it's in Mumbai, it would be MUM. So this would show the jurisdiction. Then it would be the name, first letter of the name of the deductor. So suppose I'm talking about Ridhima, so it would be DELR. Then next 5 would be the random digits allocated to you, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And last would be a letter, again randomly allocated. So this is how your TAN number is. So in case any of you has experienced deduction of tax, you can see if the certificate which is issued to you as a deductee, you can see the TAN number would be in this format. And if you're a deductor, you can easily see the TAN number would be in this format. So PAN and TAN में difference क्या है? PAN is from the point of view of assessees who will show through a unique identification number unka tax details, whatever their income is, whatever their tax details are, whatever their tax related transactions are, from the income tax perspective are shown. This is for the PAN and the routed it through the PAN number. TAN is from the point of view of deductor. That person who has to deduct tax only will obtain it, and all his information of the tax deducted or collected by him would be routed through the TAN number. And all of these details of TAN would go where? It will go in your returns, which is your TDS returns, TCS returns. It will go in certain financial transactions. It will go in your challans when you're depositing the challans to the department. When you're depositing the taxes to your department, the taxes of what? Taxes which you have deducted to the department. Then the details of the challan goes. It goes on the certificate which will you issue to the deductee. On that also the details of TAN goes. TAN, agar if quoted wrong or if not obtained, both them attracts a penalty of 10,000. Now, so here we are clear whether the person, every person should have a TAN, not mandatory, only when you do a transaction in which TDS is required to be deducted, and then all the compliances in relation to it will attract that TAN number. Now, can you please tell, just one second. Do I have to obtain separate TAN for each transaction, or one TAN is enough? No, obviously. So if I am dealing with I am Mr. B, okay, I'm the deductor. I am dealing with Mr. A, Mr. C, Mr. G, Mr. F, any number of people, any type of transaction, all of those will go through one TAN. मेरे को बार TAN obtain नहीं करना. Whenever the TAN concept goes or the TDS concept goes, think yourself as a deductor only. You're not the person who's earning the income. You're the person who's the source of the income. So think yourself as a deductor, and all the transactions which are happening on which tax has to be deducted would have only your one TAN. Now, since you said that there would be only one TAN, our next poll would be live by now, I hope. Whereby my question is, can different branches have different TAN number, or can one person have multiple TAN number? One TAN is enough. Perfect. Gurudat, Kanalia, good. Gurudat says yes, ma'am, branch can have. TAN is based on plan. Mahinder says no. Okay, good. Botsby says it is different in states. Okay, one TAN for one PAN. Very good, Kanalia. Good, good. Very good, Divya. Okay. So absolutely it is correct. Illegal. It is illegal for one person to have more than one PAN, and similarly it is illegal for one person to have more than one TAN. But there goes an exception when we talk about branches and division. Now the best examples through which you can understand is banks. You are a bank. Think yourself as a bank, any branch of the bank. Now there are thousands branches of bank, okay, and then each branch has thousands of customers and or thousands of transactions on which tax is deducted. Imagine the quantum of data and the quantum of error which can go if all of those stuffs are gone through one single time. So generally, to segregate the database, especially for branches and divisions, you can operate separate TAN. So there would be one main TAN, and then there would be TAN for the branches, separate branches, whereby it would be routed to their addresses. So for each branch or division, definitely that one bank can obtain the TAN. So if I talk about ICICI Bank, all of their branches would have separate TAN number based on the quantum. So if you go in rural area, they may not have a separate TAN number, but otherwise all of their branches have separate TAN number. Okay. Another question which I want to have is, very recently there was a concept of interchangeability of PAN and Aadhaar, whereby you need to quote PAN, you can also quote Aadhaar in that case. जहां जहां पैन कोड करने का जरूरत था वहां पे गवर्नमेंट हैज अलाउड टू कोड दी आधार. Is it applicable for TAN also? Can I interchangeably use TAN and Aadhaar? No, absolutely no. So TAN and Aadhaar ke liye there is no such provisions. Yes, Piju, there is no such provisions when it comes to TAN and Aadhaar. So please, companies don't have Aadhaar, obviously valid, but there is no interchangeably provision. See, PAN and Aadhaar is from the perspective of the taxpayer, the person who is earning income, paying taxes, all of that stuff. TAN is from the perspective of the deductor, and that deductor is doing only the compliances in relation to the deduction of tax and depositing it to the government and flowing that cycle. Okay, so टैन की जगह आधार यूज करना, ये मत बोलना कि आई हैव लिंक्ड माय पैन विद आधार एंड नाउ आई कैन यूज इट विद टैन. Clear? Does anyone has any query up till now in relation to TAN number and the concept of TDS and TCS? Obviously, this class is about concepts, so we will not go into the detailing of different types of payments, their sections and their rates. We are just discussing the ecosystem of TDS. Perfect. So, yes, you will get the recording of this. Someone has asked that there is a concept of GST, TDS and GST. Yes, there is a concept of TDS and GST, but we are covering it from the perspective of income tax. I hope my screen is visible. Yeah. So one friend, अब GST क्या हो? अब suppose करो this is a general circular guideline. If you have any confusion on, there is 1 lakh का services, and उसपे there is 18% GST. Comes to 18,000. Total 1,18,000. Now, on what amount you will deduct the TDS? Whether you will deduct the TDS on 1 lakh or whether you will deduct the TDS on 18,000. Now, there is this clarification which came especially in case of rent. There is there, but we do apply it for all types of payment generally. That the TDS is deducted on the income which is 1 lakh. So on 1,10,000 would be deducted and 1,08,000 would be made as payment. Okay. So 118 पे भी काटोगे. See, if you deduct higher TDS, the person can ask for refund. But if you show him that, sir, I have deposited your TDS and it will go in your credit, he may settle down it. But deducting higher TDS may attract a coercion from the deductee, but law does not say that you would be at mistake. Obviously, if you have deducted it, you can give him a refund in case you have not deposited. If you have deposited it, make sure that you have deposited in the credit of that person only and not done any hera-feri. Okay, so that is allowed. But yeah, up 1 lakh की जगह 10% की जगह 5% निकाल सकते until and unless you have a lower deduction certificate. ठीक है, until unless the person who is the deductee says that deduct so and so certificate, I have an authority from, or I have a approval from the authority. Okay. So in case mein, yes, TDS would be deducted at 10,000 and net payment of 1,08,000 would go. Clear? So if this was a question in relation to GST, I hope it is answered. Now, moving on to the concept of TAN. So I told you there are certain transactions on which TDS has to be deducted on that transactions, and for doing that transactions, you have to obtain the TAN as a deductor and then do all these steps of depositing, certificate, return, certificate, correct? But now there are just 4 transactions, 4 types of transactions. If you are doing such transaction, in that case, TAN number is not required. What did I say? TAN number is not required, or TAN is not required. Why it is not required? Because you see, when you become a deductor, a whole list of compliances go. And obviously, if you are a person who is doing certain transactions, you will hire a CA or you will hire any accountant who will take care of all of these compliances. Correct? So the government generally do not put that burden on small taxpayers or small individuals who have nominal turnover or a basic turnover. But there are certain transactions where you have to deduct tax, and having a TAN is not mandatory. And this transaction first is under 194 IA. That is when you are a buyer and you are purchasing a property for a value of 50 lakhs or more. So for a consideration of 50 lakhs or more, then as a buyer, you have to deduct the TDS or you have to deduct the tax of the seller while making the payment or whenever it is due, whichever is earlier, when you are purchasing a certain property. In that case, as a buyer, even if you do not have TAN, you do not have to require to obtain TAN. You just have to deduct the tax and deposit the tax in a single form. And that form just is a one party transaction form, and it will have your details, it will have seller details, and that's it. And you will deposit the tax. So it's just a one time activity which you have to do, and not monthly, quarterly, and certificate part every quarter you have to take care of. Okay. Similarly, there are certain rent transactions. One rent is deducted, if you can understand, under section 194I. But there are certain transactions of rent or payment of rent when an individual makes a payment who does not have a business or profession, but he pays a rent of a very handsome amount, which is 50,000 per month. Or if you're talking about a small taxpayer, then also he's paying a rent of such a handsome amount, then he has to deduct the TDS. And that TDS can be deducted without TAN. Same process goes. Similarly, certain transactions, when their single party value crosses 50 lakhs, a person have to deduct the TDS. If he has not deducted the TDS under different sections, I'm not putting the sections here because we have not discussed them, but these are certain situations in which you can deduct TDS, deposit the TDS, file the return in one go through your PAN number itself. And this is very latest addition in relation to virtual digital assets. Okay, so when you have to deduct TDS on the virtual digital asset transaction, these all are in relation to your no TAN, but yes, deduction of TDS. Yes, Mahendra, I am. Okay. So we can we use Aadhaar instead of TAN as we do in case of PAN? Definitely not. We just discussed interchangeably of TAN and Aadhaar is not there. Interchangeably of PAN and Aadhaar is there, but TAN is a whole different ecosystem whereby a person is deducting tax and doing all the related compliances. That has to be done through TAN number only, except these four situations. Crypto assets. Gurdeep, okay? Thank you so much, Mahendra. So ये हो गया TDS का concept. Now TCS is just a Uno reverse of TDS. Let's understand what TCS is. TDS अगर समझ आ गया, TCS is just a small cakewalk. Now TCS concept is a very recent concept. Now this is concept is called tax collection at source. Tax collection at source. अब यहाँ पे this is the whole story gets different. Here there is a buyer. Here there is a seller. Okay. Buyer will get goods from the seller and buyer will make the payment. Correct. Seller is collecting the payment. Correct. Seller is collecting the payment. Now here, as he collects the payment, he collects additionally a tax amount of a certain percentage from buyer. So suppose you are a buyer of goods, say scrap, because there are certain transactions on which TCS is there. say scrap. Now, what will happen when you are making the payment of, suppose, 1 lakh rupees for scrap which you purchase from seller? He will collect additional 1% from you, which is 1,000 rupees, and you will make a net payment of 1,01,000. You will make a net payment of 1,01,000 to the seller. Now, what has happened here? The seller, along with what he has to collect, he has collected more of the tax from you. From you. You are the buyer, I am the seller. So I have collected more 1,000 from you. Now, since I have collected, I becomes a collector, you are the collectee. Now, interesting part. On whom all the compliances will now burden? On the collector. He collected the tax from you. He will deposit the tax. So I will now deposit the collected tax which I collected from you to the government on your behalf. On your behalf. Also, I will file the TCS return here. I'll file the TCS return here to tell that from so and so person I've collected so and so tax, and it will reflect in your credit, and also issue you the certificate that whatever tax was collected from you has been deposited to the government. Here also the transaction which is for the buyer, the purchase is of 1 lakh only, seller ke liye sale is of 1 lakh only, that 1,000 is additional liability on the seller to be disposed of. Okay, so this is what total reversal of tax deduction at source, that where there was a deduction happening and the source itself was deducting, here you are collecting it from the source. Okay. Absolutely correct, Mahendra. One such transaction which happens, see, यहाँ पे income relation नहीं है इतना. One such transaction, purchase sale का ज़्यादा है. One such transaction which I was referring to and which Mahendra has absolutely pointed out. If you purchase a high value car which is of 10 lakh or more, in that cases the dealer collects tax from you. The dealer collects tax from you. Okay, so you are the buyer and that tax you are paying extra from your pocket, but it is being deposited to the government. It is being deposited to the government by the dealer on your behalf. So whenever you are showing the income and filing the return for that previous year, you can take the credit of it. You can take the credit of it. Clear? And यहाँ पे भी the compliances go on and on. Similarly, in the same manner, collects the tax, deposit the tax monthly, file the return, issue the certificate. So there is different, exactly like tax deduction at source, the compliances go here also same. And for doing both tax collection and both tax deduction at source, you can do it with the same thing, with the same TAN number. So suppose I am so suppose I am paying rent also. So when I'm paying rent, if I have to deduct TDS, I will deduct TDS under the same TAN. And when I am selling certain goods and I'm collecting TCS, I will collect it under the same TAN. So I do not have to obtain a separate TAN for collecting tax and deducting tax. No, it can be done with the same number. The returns are filed separately. TDS ka there are different forms, TCS ka there is different form. So the returns are filed separately. All the TCS collectee ka information I will route it through the PAN number of the collectee. गवर्नमेंट को कैसे पता चलेगा? थ्रू द पैन ऑफ द कलेक्टी. क्लियर? So that's all for the concept of TAN from my side. If you have any queries, I would be very happy to take. Any query in relation to concept, TAN number? So I'll quickly show you the site also where you can apply for TAN. I hope the screen is visible. Yeah. So on protein, protein is the first, earlier it was NSDL. TDS is Tax Information Network. वहाँ पे जाके, here you can apply for your TAN number, for your PAN number. You can get the information of facilitation centers. All of these informations are there, and you can do it by yourself without any help of a professional of application of TAN. And how does the application form shows? Let me show you that too. So this is how your form shows. You just have to fill in your area code, whatever category. So since I've selected a category of branch, division of company, other categories are frozen. I just have to fill in the name of the company, the name of the location of the branch, person designated or responsible for all these activities, the address, PAN number if applicable, and submit it. That's it. By making the payment. I mean, it can be done as fast as you order your food. More than that fast, it can be done. Obviously, it takes 14 days time minimum to come. Even earlier, it can come. So at least 14 days time generally takes to get a TAN. Very good questions I have. So Gurdeep asks, is TCS only charged or deducted in purchase? So TCS, the concept when introduced was only on purchase of certain goods. That goods were alcohol, scrap, tendu leaves, forest produce. Okay. But as the government is widening its aspect of tax collection of information, they are applying the TCS aspects to many transactions. Then it got routed to your motor vehicle purchase. Then it got routed to finance transaction, your foreign remittance. So TCS, it is there. The scope is getting widened day by day. So TDS credit, TCS credit is optional or mandatory? Very good questions, Anuj. So TDS, TCS credit, what happens is, if someone has deducted your tax, let's take it from that example, then that person has to deposit it on your behalf and you should get your credit. See, आपको किसी से पैसा लेना था, he did not give it to you and said that I'm depositing it on your behalf. So if that credit is not appearing, you can ask that person and sue that person that why that credit is not appearing. He would also be a defaulter from the income tax perspective, and you can also take a action against him. Any other query? So what you saw, or what we did right now in the past 1 hour, was basically a very small portion of our tax and accounts professional course. One sec. So under this course, as I explained you the concept, Along with the concept, we even teach you how you have to file that particular application. When we talk about TAN, how do you have to deposit the TDS? When do you have to deduct the TDS first? How do you have to deposit that TDS? How will you file the return? And how the certificate is issued? All of these steps का conceptual part and their actual practical demonstration is taught through a curriculum. And this TDS is just one aspect. When we talk about income tax ka provisions we explain, income tax ka return filing we explain, advanced tax we explain. When we talk about GST ka obviously the calculations, first GST ka understanding requires a great discussion. So what is goods, supplies, when you have to actually take the input tax credit on what transactions, e-way bill, e-invoicing, all of these composition scheme, return filing, all of these GSTR1, GSTR3B, all of these in details are covered in the GST. When I talk about labor laws, we have PF and ESI compliances, we have FSSAI, how do you have to get its registrations, how do you have to get MSME registration. So just not the law aspect, the practical demonstration of all these things, and you get a book also where you get the steps of all these particular compliances is what our offering actually is to you. So if you have any course related query, I'll also be very happy to take. If you're interested in our course, our team can get in touch with you for the course. So just 1 second, I missed few queries. 1 second. So if you miss the TDS payment, what is the penalty? So first of all, before penalty, income tax make the provisions when you do any offense or default starts with interest. So first they charge you interest. Interest, if you do not deduct tax, is 1% per month or part of the month. Interest, if you do not deposit the tax, is 1.5% per month or part of the month. So you have to deposit the interest. Then there is fees if you do not file the return of income. And in case you become a permanent defaulter, then government obviously can take a penal action against you, penal proceedings against you. So, and obviously, if you will not deduct or deposit the tax which you have deducted, and if you are required to deduct and you did not deduct it, or if you're required to deduct, you deducted it and did not deposit it with the government, first of all, that expense, you will not get the benefit of that expense. That means from your profit, that expense would not be allowed to be reduced. Secondly, this would be reported in your tax audit. Thirdly, you have to pay interest on it. You become a defaulter, you become an assessee in default. So all these repercussions come. So if you want to be a compliant taxpayer and take the full benefits of your expenses, you have to deduct the taxes. So if you missed your October due date, generally the tax which you deduct in a month has to be deposited by 7th of the next month. So October tax has to be deposited by 7th November. November tax has to be deposited by 7th December, except in case of March, which has to happen in by 30th of April. So in case you have not deposited the tax yet, kindly deposit it with the interest amount on whatever deduction you made. Gurdeep, I hope your queries answer. Anuj has interesting query. TDS applies on both cash and bank transactions or only on bank transactions. So the mode of payment is nowhere specified. Whatever is your mode of payment, how are you settling in? Or the point here important is the type of payment, the nature of payment. Whatever is your nature of the payment, if that attracts TDS, that attracts the provisions of TDS, you have to deduct the TDS. Okay, Anuj, perfect. So someone has asked, nowadays older years late fees under Section 234 e-demand notices are the big one. Is there any chances to give waiver? So generally there is no waiver on such fees. Kindly please deposit the fees, but yes, the fee cannot be more than your tax deduction amount. So if suppose you made your tax which was required to be deducted was of 10,000, and the fee would nowhere cross 10,000 in case of any default. So in case anyone has any queries in respect to the concept or our course, I would be very happy to take. And if you want to suggest any further topic which you're looking for from the concept perspective, that this particular topic or concept also should be clear, we would be very happy. You can drop on your suggestions in the chat box. Done. So thank you so much. It was a great interactive session, and kudos to all of you to be such a great audience. It actually, I had a great time discussing the provisions of TDS and TCS. I hope it added value to your knowledge. Have a good night. Thank you so much.